So coming back to
Yes.
the specific context of the high conflict divorce, so could you just tell me what are the situations in which women, is it women or men, or do you see anyone who's going through a high conflict divorce?
Well, specifically, I would say I know that I'm here for anyone, but most the people that come to me are generally women.
Okay.
In my Facebook group that I have, for instance, for the women in our area, I decided to keep it as women because I know that there are men in situations where they are abused by their spouses as well.
Right.
And I know a few of these men, but I knew that if it became women and men, it would start these arguments about,
Right. Of course.
you have men are bad, women are bad. And
Right.
so I decided to limit it like that. But that's who I help. And I help all people, whether they've been married or not, because this is the next thing I want to say is when you leave someone, right, and you have property together or children together, you're still enmeshed, even if you haven't gotten married. You don't have the additional burden of a divorce process to go through.
Mhm.
But you do have the burden of having to deal with that person. If you have children, you'll have to deal with them until your children age out of the system,
Yeah.
whatever age that is. And
Mhm.
luckily, here in Quebec, it's generally regarded that at the age of 14, children can make their own medical decisions, which is a big relief for some people. And the courts will take children's wishes into account about which parent they want to be with from
Right.
about the age of 14. So we are actually much luckier here in regards of abusive
Mhm.
ex-partners than a lot of places in North America.
Right. That's fascinating,
Mm.
actually. So just to, give the context of Asia and India, usually people are considered as minors until the age of 18.
Yes, here too.
Yes.
Here too.
So, okay, because you said they can take their own medical decisions at 14, which I think is
Yeah,
quite
that's
remarkable.
the
Yeah.
yes, that's the one
Right.
thing where they have their own
Right.
decision-making
Right.
authority.
Very interesting.
Yes.
So what kind of what kind of situations do women find themselves in when they seek you out? Is there any pattern, or do you see any
Yeah,
trends?
yeah, there is generally a pattern that their relationship or marriage to their ex has ended. Either they have ended it, or sometimes their ex has ended it. Their ex has been having an affair, or the ex has started a new relationship. Usually that's, but they are constantly being abused and harassed by their ex. And it turns out that there was an element of domestic violence in the relationship or the marriage as well.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's very overt, sometimes it's very egregious. And sometimes it's less. It's more like coercive control,
Mhm.
psychological abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. And they often, some of them don't even realize that they're being abused.
Yeah.
They think there's something wrong with them. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's usually that's how it is. They some kind of verbal harassment from their ex. Their ex
Right.
is using the children
Right.
against them sometimes.
So the situation that you described, I think it's far more common than we realize, and I think more and more women are becoming aware of the fact that, as you said, this subtle emotional abuse,
Mm.
which ends up in a kind of a self gaslighting, and
Yeah.
is probably extremely common when your partner is narcissistic. So, is that
Mm.
something that you come across very often?
Yeah. Well, that was my own experience actually,
Mhm.
because I was telling you how I was in this little bubble, and I honestly thought there was something wrong with me through my, just this is, and I remember, I wanted to go for couples counseling with my ex, and he refused, and I said, well, I'll go for counseling then by myself, and he said, you
Right.
can't decide to go for counseling. We have to decide as a couple that you can go for
Wow.
counseling. And I was like, okay, I'm trying to understand this. Let me, am I wrong to want to go by myself? And I actually went to a colleague of mine. I was working a very small part-time job there at the
Mhm.
time. And I had this colleague who was older than me. She was kind of conservative woman, she was a religious woman. And so I thought maybe she can help me understand where my husband is coming from, help
Mhm.
me, toe the line, realize that put my rebelliousness behind me or whatever, and explain to me how I'm wrong, you know. And I told her the story, and she looked and she said, he's abusing you.
Wow.
And like, what? And, I would gaslight myself. I would constantly, participate because I wanted to believe the best. And a lot of these women after, luckily I realized that that's what made me leave him. And then I realized that I was being abused. But a lot of these, their marriages end for whatever reason, conflict, or often especially if their ex finds a new partner and discards them, they still don't realize that they are being abused, and they blame themselves, or they think, there's something wrong. They don't realize that this is actually abuse.
Wow.
Until someone tells them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, Reena. I must say it resonates a lot with my own experience. I honestly, when I look back on it, I think I spent the last 10 years thinking, okay, maybe he's in a bad mood for some reason. Not realizing. It's like, every time I would find some different excuse. Yeah, there's something wrong today, maybe today there was this reason. He has anger issues, something went wrong at work. Maybe, being an Indian, the typical sort of fragile male ego of the Indian, and the more successful I was at work, the crankier he seemed to get. And in my head, I'd kind of just labeled it as a crankiness. I wasn't kind of even able to acknowledge that there was this passive aggressive emotional abuse, financial control happening. So I think it's really remarkable that, people like us, we've kind of suffered that and emerged from it, and in a way kind of won those battles. And also sharing our experience and expertise with other people. So if you could just tell me, what are kind of the top tips, or what is the framework you use for the people you serve?
Well, first of all, I teach them to understand their ex, to kind of profile their ex. This is one of the things that is really, really important, because once I understood what was driving my ex-husband, I was able to deal with it much better. And if you don't understand it, you keep saying, this is unbelievable. Why does he keep doing this to me? I'm trying to help him. I get, but why? And you're like a deer in the headlights, and they're constantly coming at you, and you're easy prey. So if you can understand why they behave the way they do, which is a lot of what I do in my LinkedIn posts, is explaining this kind of thing, then you can start understanding what their triggers are, what their hot buttons are, why they react, what they react to, and it becomes much easier to deal with it. And it also becomes it empowers you, because you realize the problem is not you. I mean, not generally not you, because part of the issues with a high conflict divorce is you can have one partner who is the high conflict person. You will always have that conflict, because that partner creates conflict everywhere they go.
Right.
They create conflict eventually in the workplace. They create conflict on the road. Whenever I have someone who has road rage, or like that kind of thing, and I let them pass me, and I just think, thank God I'm not married to that person. I pity their wife or whatever, but the other thing is the other partner is drawn into that conflict. So let's take that road rage situation again. Someone is driving up your bum there on the highway. You can either react to that and like brake suddenly, or pull out, or whatever, and worsen the conflict. And we know what's happened in some of those situations, right? They have sometimes fatal ends. Or you can just pull over into the slow lane. I mean, I know in India people have different driving habits than here, but you have, you pull over, let them pass by you, and let them go on their way, and just let forget about them.
Right.
So there are ways of, dealing with conflict. So that's the other thing I teach them, is once they understand their ex, then starting to understand themselves as well, and their own triggers. Why is this triggering me? What am I? Is this fear? Is this is this me wanting to be right all the time? Which is fair enough, because there's one thing about the divorce process: it makes you wrong all the time. Often the courts see these two people coming at them and sees them both as equal partners in the conflict, even if one partner is the
Right.
one creating the majority of the conflict, and you want to be understood and heard, and you're not.
Right.
And it's frustrating, and often with a lot of people, unfortunately, they don't react well to that, and they make things worse for themselves. So that's the
Right.
other thing I teach them, is how to improve their presentation vis-a-vis the courts or experts that are involved in their
Right.
case and that kind of thing.
Wow.
And then the last thing is communication with their ex as well. How to communicate with their ex in a way that makes their ex lose interest in them. And
that sounds interesting. Could you elaborate that a little bit?
Well, it's called, it's one technique. There's a couple of techniques for communicating with toxic people. And I don't like to say the word narcissist because I'm not here to diagnose anyone. There are all kinds of toxic people. So I prefer to use toxic people, but yes, a lot of them have narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
And if your ex has ticks all the boxes for narcissistic personality disorder, then you can work with that. But
right.
And by the way, I just want to say, never ever diagnose someone to their face. Never ever. Yes, I have never ever told them they're narcissistic.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very dangerous, because you just make them react, and that just makes things worse. So if you find out, they tick all the boxes for whatever it is, keep that to yourself, and you can use that as part of your learning about your ex and learning how to deal with your ex or your partner, your current partner, if they're like that, or your boss. It could be a boss. It could be a roommate. It could be the person who lives down the hall from you. We all encounter these people.
Of course.
Of course. So that's the other thing, is how to communicate with these people. And there are some techniques. There's one called BIFF, BIFF, which is brief. I think it stands for brief, informative, friendly, and I'm just trying to look it up. Brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Okay, that's the one technique. And it's
so in a way to stay very formal and be emotionally disengaged.
Well, this is where I'm going to. This is a starting point. First of all, if you're dealing with someone if it's your boss or an organization or something, the BIFF response is good. It has a lot to offer, and it's you can find it out about it on the High Conflict Institute, is the name of the organization that talks about this. But when it comes to your ex, if you are communicating and writing with your ex, and the court sees this communication, because another thing you have to bear in mind is, if you are going through a divorce or a separation, there are children involved, and you have to communicate with your ex, and your communication is formal and unfriendly, it's like you don't like your ex, and the court will tend to pounce on any tiny negative thing coming from you, or anything that can be perceived as negative, because the courts want to be fair. They want to be fair to both parties. They want to be, even though they acknowledge that one of the parties creates conflict, they're all about whataboutism, two-sided, and they want to find fault on both sides, because they don't want to be seen as being unfair. So they will look for something on the other side that's negative as well. That's the tendency most of the time. And so
if you've written some emails which sound like they were not very friendly, then you're saying that could be used against you.
My ex-husband, he for instance, when I was applying for permanent residence in Canada, he had left Canada by that time, and I had taken him to court for some very abusive behavior. That was actually, it was illegal what he had done. It had become illegal, and I had won, and he left Canada, and I was applying for permanent residence. And so I had to send him a form to sign for our two youngest children, who are still minors at the time, for him to give permission for them to be included in my permanent residence. And he refused. He sent me an email saying, I refuse because you took me to court You treated me like
Right.
a bully, So in that email, he literally said, I refuse,
Right.
and it was for reasons of revenge. And I sent him, like, one of the emails I sent him said something like, see you in court, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one. And we ended up going to court. I took him to court again for to get permission to apply for my children's passports by myself, to get and so that I would and to for child support and everything. And his lawyer used that one sentence, see you in court. Can't remember what
Right.
it was.
Right.
And the judge, held that against me, even though his
Wow.
whole justification was abusive. What he had done was incredibly abusive. There was a
Right.
previous judgment against him. So that's why you have to be very careful what you
Hmm.
say. And as I was saying, the Biff response is one thing. There's also
Hmm.
something known as gray rock. Have you heard of that?
Yes. Particularly with the
Yes.
covert passive aggressive narcissist. I
Yes.
believe that's supposed
Yeah.
to be, yeah. So it's essentially, if I could sort of elaborate, essentially you
Mhm.
behave like you are a gray rock. You just sit there without any reaction, without any emotional energy, because the narcissist feeds off your energy. So the more you
Yes.
are sort of destabilized or, emotionally in chaos, they actually enjoy that at a subconscious level.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Right,
And that's, you're giving them supply. That's the whole
right,
thing, is you give them supply,
right.
narcissistic supply. And any supply they love, whether it's negative,
Sure.
praising them and flattering them,
Hmm.
or, I mean, positive, or whether it's negative, like
Right,
angry
right.
with them. It's still
Wow.
attention. I think there was, didn't Madonna, Madonna,
Yes.
didn't she once say, the singer, there's no such thing as bad publicity or
Yes.
something?
Someone said that,
Yes.
yes. So it's the same with
Yeah,
narcissists. There's no such thing as bad attention. Whatever
that's right.
they get is good. So coming back
Yes.
to
So
the kind of people you are helping,
the grey
uh,
rock, wait, let's try and talk about the
yes,
grey rock
yes,
first.
sure, please.
So the grey rock, that is being boring, but it's also kind of unfriendly as well, and doesn't paint a good picture for the court. So Tina Swithin came up with something called yellow rock,
Okay,
which is a which is like goes beyond Biff or gray rock, and yellow rock. It's gray rock, but with a patina of friendliness, of niceness.
okay,
Yes, like you could end it's and it's a special way of writing an email, communicating with a narcissist that has a much more friendly approach. And what she says is like, imagine that you're talking to a colleague, you know, it should still be authentic and true to who you
right,
are, and not give them supply, not, be,
right,
but just like being much more pleasant, taking just saying thank you very much. I appreciate your, whatever you can appreciate, whatever
right,
you can find to
right,
appreciate in what they've done. Say, I appreciate that you're taking the time to deal with this, or something like that. And another thing that I have, and when I say as well, because I'm also a copywriter and a translator, so, and I do writing for marketing. And one thing I say is, you should use contractions if you're
hmm,
communicating in English. Don't say, I am attempting to find a therapist who can give, the children whatever. You say,
right,
hi, so and so,
right,
I'm looking
right,
for a
right.
therapist, or
So
I'm,
keep it
so use
conversational. Keep it conversational, not very
conversational.
formal.
Imagine you're
Right,
talking to the person, not
right.
formal,
Hmm.
pleasant, but no supply.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really important. It does seem as though we are hearing so much more about narcissism now than ever before, and that's probably an awareness bias. And probably in the earlier generations, as you said, our parents' generation, grandparents' generation, women didn't have a choice, or this wasn't really spoken about openly. How do you how do most of the high conflict divorces happen where children are involved or finances are involved, or is it just a partner trying to control and create, as you said, coercive control over the other one?
Well, yes, it is coercive control, but people will try to get control any way they can. And for instance, I know someone who left her boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of people I know who left their partners. There were no children involved. There was no property involved. But one of them, her boyfriend, actually, her ex-boyfriend actually sent defamatory messages about her to her work, conducted a smear campaign
Wow.
against her. And another one, she had also these. It's funny. It's like I'm a magnet for these people. You know, I'll start talking to my son's the music the receptionist. It was after I left my house, the receptionist at my son's music school where he went to for guitar lessons, and that was that lady. You know, she told me this story as we got to know each other. And another lady who was the manager of a coffee shop I used to go to all the time. She told me the story when she left her boyfriend, and she had this set of Christmas ornaments that every year her godmother would give her one Christmas ornament, a
Right.
special Christmas ornament. And from the age of 1, since her birth, she had gotten one for every birthday
Wow.
or every Christmas, I suppose. And she left, and her stuff was still there. And when she went back to fetch it, you know what he'd done, the
My
box of
goodness.
Christmas ornaments were there. Each of the Christmas ornaments was smashed to pieces in its little
My
thing in
goodness.
the box. So people will do whatever they can to hurt and
Right.
control. And
Right.
it was a coercive, controlled domestic violence relationship. But this was the extent to which these particular people in this situation could
Right.
try to hurt their partners who had left them, right?
Right. Right.
And there was no money involved, there were no children involved. But
Right.
when there's money involved, for instance, I know a gentleman I know who owned a house together with his partner. And in this case, it was a woman who was abusing a man. And he went through hell with that situation, trying to extricate himself from
Right.
this relationship, this house and everything, and and demands. And so yeah. And when you have, the more they have a hold of you, the more they will do. And if it's children, then then they've got,
Of
that's the
course.
only way they can control you is through the children.
Of course.